7 decades ago, the first television adaptation of Superman arrived. Now, it's time to rocket back to the 1952 to 1958 series Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves. In this rewatch podcast, my guests and I break down each episode, from its black and white crime drama beginnings to the kid-friendly color seasons, as we celebrate one of the most underrated Man of Steel depictions of all time. Welcome to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 1, Episode 5, The Monkey Mystery, is the editor-in-chief of 13thDimension.com, Dan Greenfield. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. This is great. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm very excited to compare notes generally and specifically with respect to this episode. So like I said, Season 1, Episode 5 aired October 17th, 1952, written by Peter Freeman and Doris Gilbert, directed by Tommy Carr, and our synopsis from the DVD sets: searching for stolen defense secrets, Clark Kent encounters a brutalized woman, a slain organ grinder, and a monkey dressed as Superman. This is quite the episode.
You know, when I hear it boiled down to its bare essentials like that, it's just like, yeah, that's exactly what it's about. I mean, that is really what it's about. But it's got a bunch of things going on, and each of those parts are really entertaining. But it's whether they mesh is the issue, because I think that my overall sense of the episode is that it's almost like a microcosm of the show itself. It's like it could not decide yet what it wanted to be. And on the one hand, you have this really cool kind of noirish espionage thing going on. And then you've got a monkey running around in a Superman costume.
Yes. So well, actually, let me just say right off the bat here, just as a funny side note, earlier today, before you and I sat down to record this, my family and I went to the Bronx Zoo. We spent the morning and early afternoon at the zoo, and we had a lovely time on this crisp fall day. But the monkey house was closed, and it was just, I said, oh, how fitting, or as we're about to discuss the monkey mystery.
I'm sorry, the monkey house was closed. That's one of the best parts.
The monkey house was closed, but it's so funny because I've kind of been, I've been dumping a little bit on the synopses from the DVD sets. I felt that for some of the prior episodes, they weren't quite reflective of what the entire episode was. But yeah, I think this is maybe one of the first ones that I think really hit the nail on the head.
It's pretty succinct. Yeah, it's straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear you give your take, and obviously we'll get more into this, but what I was thinking about in terms of my overall impressions, I liked that juxtaposition of the silly, cute monkey business with the high stakes of the communist scientist who defected and is trying to get these the secret formula to the president of the United States through his daughter. I like that, but I do get what you're saying, and that's a really good point. That in a lot of ways it does sort of represent that tension in the show between being this more hard-boiled crime noir versus a kid's superhero show.
But I do think it all works. It's just kind of an odd choice, because it's like the episode isn't really clear on what it wants to be, but they pull it off. And part of it is in my mind, it's George Reeves' performance when he is so intent on finding that monkey as Clark Kent is one of the great Superman the key to Clark Kent in these series is that he's always frustrated because he can't turn to Superman yet. And this episode kind of has a field day with that.
I can't wait till we get to that scene, because there were a few moments performance-wise that just so stood out to me and are such great examples of why I love George Reeves as Clark and Superman, and why I enjoy this show so much. And yes, his growing, palpable frustration and impatience with Jimmy on the phone in that scene is hilarious. Like, it's so funny.
Jimmy, where are you? No.
Yeah. It's like, obviously, you would never hear profanity on that show or from Superman generally, but it's like, you could just imagine the feeling of like, God damn it, Jimmy. Like, where's this monkey?
Right.
There's some great moments, and when we get there, I really want to talk a lot about that scene of Superman on the train when he's talking to the doctor, because in that scene, he plays different facets of the Superman character. He bounces back and forth between them. And it's just like, it's such a great scene. So yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in this episode. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, because, we had been emailing about having you on the show, and I think I'd given a couple of different episode choices, and you gravitated toward this one. And I was just curious, because again, obviously this was before you had rewatched it for this podcast. What was it that made you want to do this one?
Well, it's a monkey in a Superman costume, and I am on record as being a big fan of apes in clothes doing human things, or monkeys in clothes doing human things. That's why I love Planet of the Apes. Now, I say this, and I hasten to add that I am well aware that in 1951, 52, when this was being made, and I guess 51 because the title card actually says 1951, so I'm guessing that it was actually filmed then. I know that animals were not necessarily treated well back in those days in terms of how they performed on camera. So I am fully aware of that. But at the same time, I'm going to take it in. I'm just going to take the episode on its own terms. And of course, I'm also a big fan of Lancelot Link. I mean, anytime you get monkeys or chimps, I'm sold. So that plus the film noirish aspect, like that opening scene especially, are things that show what the series tried to play with, wanted to play with, sort of, couldn't always pull it off, but sometimes really did successfully. So it was kind of that combination of things is what drew me to want to do this one.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you coming along for this flight, and it's a very cute monkey. It was a lot of fun watching those scenes. But yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to sort of get this, this Cold War espionage in the show. It was, yes, we still had our typical crooks, but right, it was part of this larger plot reflecting, the real world goings on at the time. So like that was interesting to sort of get, and again, this, wild contrast between the monkey and these spy games. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, the opening scene. Can I jump ahead to talk about the opening scene, or am I breaking your format?
No, it's quite all right. Well, what we'll do is I just want to say one last thing, and then we'll just get into our scene by scene breakdown. The last thing I just want to say by way of setup is I've talked on the show about how it was about a couple of years ago that I really got into this series, and I essentially binged the first 2 seasons and a selection of shows from the color years. And as I'm sure you know, and the audience, like when you're binging something, a lot of times it just sort of blurs together.
Yes. That's
one of the reasons I love doing this podcast, because I'm going one episode at a time and really making a meal out of each one. And they're really now cementing in my head. But before this, again, a lot of it blurred together. And so going into this, Monkey Mystery, obviously I remember the monkey part. Like I remember the sillier aspects of the show, but I guess I didn't, the connection between that and the secret formula and everything, I guess that had kind of gotten a little lost in the shuffle. So I was going into this expecting something a little bit on the lighter side. And then again, we open with that exact scene, and it's like, there's some weight to this. So, I echo everything that you said. Let's take a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, we'll get into our scene by scene breakdown of this. All right, cool. We'll be right back. Acme Comics is a locally owned and operated full-service comic book store in Greensboro, North Carolina, for people of all ages and walks of life. Since 1983, this 9-time Eisner Award nominee uses their collective knowledge and resources to connect you with the best material available. They pride themselves on their significant contemporary and vintage back-issue selection. Mail order subscriptions to new releases are available, and all offerings are available to anyone, anywhere, via mail order. Follow Acme on social media and eBay, listen to the Acme Cast on all podcast services, and visit acmecomics.com for much more. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out this family of film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. I was fortunate enough to have my work shown at these festivals, and I found them to be very enjoyable and well-run events. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news and updates about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and currently under new ownership, Moose sells a wide selection of new and old comics from every publisher, action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Flat Squirrel Productions is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP, that's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions, to save 10% on your order, and it helps support the show. Thank you. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, which happens to be my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Aw yeah. And we're back. All right, so the Monkey Mystery. We open with this title card. We're told Central Europe, 1951. And yes, these episodes were all made in 1951. They sat on the shelf, until 1952, until Kellogg's came aboard as a sponsor, and they started airing. And we see these newspaper headlines, right, about this scientist, Maleska, how he's now an enemy of the state. And then we spend a good bit of time with Jan Maleska and his daughter Maria in this cave as they're being hunted by soldiers and dogs. And, we're with them for a while, and, we're in another country. These are unfamiliar characters. I found it surprisingly compelling. What was your impression of this scene?
I think it's a great start. And I remember the first time I saw it also because I only, like you, really binged the show within the last few years. I grew up, as we've established many times over, but if you're a first-time listener, I am a big Batman fan. And it was all rooted in the 1966 TV show. Superman was on at that time. When I was watching it in syndication in the early 70s, but it was always just there for me. For whatever reason, I was never found it as compelling. So I never really watched or sat and watched the whole series until a few years ago. And when I did, I became addicted and fell in love with the show and really began to understand what made it so great and why it still to this day has a very loyal audience. And I do remember the first time I saw this episode and that opening was like, wow, this is bigger. This isn't a haunted lighthouse. This is world stakes. This is it's scary, it's dramatic, it's tense. It feels almost like you're watching the beginning of a noir film of that same era, Cold War, post-war story. And in another story, it would be about the girl and making her way to the United States. But here it's it's the MacGuffin basically. So yeah, it's a very grim opening. The stakes are clearly very high. It's interesting how they don't name the country. They make it an unnamed Central European country that is clearly under the Soviet thumb. But they make it really clear. Like, here, you got to take this to the president of the United States. They go right to the top with who they need to get this to. So they're telling little kids in that sense, oh, only the president can know. Then this must be very important. And I think it works really, really well and surprisingly moving when this poor girl has to leave her father behind to be killed because she knows he's going to be killed, and so does he. And yet they still make that choice, that kind of brave choice.
Yeah, I mean, it really pulls you in, through that initial scene and this tearful goodbye, and like you said, he's entrusting her with this secret formula that can again play a large role in the current state of the world. We get a little more clarity later on. It seems to be this defense against atomic weapons. We don't know exactly what that would entail, but. Again, he hides it in this locket that he gives her, and like you said,
the formula. The formula is really the instructions to duck and cover. That's what I've figured out, that that must have been what the formula was, because there is no defense against nuclear weapons except for other weapons. And even then, as we know, but I digress. I mean, you get into, the stakes are very high, but it's also brutal. I mean, it's not just moving when she has to leave and he's hiding in the cave. They actually show him getting beaten by the guards, or basically tortured. I mean,
whipped. He gets whipped.
He gets whipped. Yeah. And of course he dies off screen, but I'm thinking, this is 1952 TV. It's just, very interesting that they show this on what was ostensibly a kids show.
As has been said, and we'll continue to talk about as we make our way through this series, obviously the first two seasons, and the first season in particular, was a lot darker and grittier than the rest of the show would become, especially when we get to the color years. But even within that context, it still feels like a lot to show this guy getting whipped. There are other episodes coming up where you see someone get shot and killed, but the whipping was, and look, it's not an extended sequence, but still, even just for those few seconds, it definitely, again, it paints a very grim picture.
Yeah, it's unsettling. Yeah.
So then we get this montage of Maria, traveling to America, and then we cut to this officer, right, who is getting information about, where she's heading, and he goes to this filing cabinet and he pulls out contact information for some operative, Harold Crane, in Metropolis. Right, and tells this person to get this information to him to intercept Maria and get the locket. So that's our basic setup to this episode. And from there, we go to this this kindly, friendly organ grinder and his monkey on the streets of Metropolis, performing for the children, putting on a very fun show. And of course, Lois and Clark come upon them, and the monkey pulls out a fortune to give to Lois. I have to say, I really liked seeing Lois and Clark in this scene throughout, but especially at the beginning, because, we always talk about Phyllis Coates, and I say it every episode, but I love her as Lois. She is my preferred Lois on this show.
I think she's great. I do not understand why some people just turn their nose up at Phyllis Coates. I think she was terrific in the role. And I think she gets an unfair sort of, and I'm not sure why that is. I mean, she's definitely different than Noel Neal, but I think she does a perfectly fine job. She's a lot, she's a lot more capable than they showed Lois later being. She's competitive. She's snarky. She's a fun character. I really like her.
As do I. And what I was going to say is, like, one of the reasons why I often gravitate towards her version of the character is she's so tough. Like, this is the very, very tough as nails Lois. But in this scene, especially at the beginning, you see a very warm, soft side to both her and Clark. Not that you don't in other instances, but I enjoyed seeing, how they were taking in this scene of the organ grinder and the kids. And then, the little banter, like when she opens up the piece of paper and Clark wants to know what her fortune is, and she doesn't want to tell him, and they have their little back and forth. And then, of course, we see what it is, right? It's information. It's a message that is meant to be delivered to these operatives in Metropolis, about how Maria Maleska's plane was rerouted, and now she's getting on the Washington Limited train to D.C. So Lois sees this and knows enough to know that this is a big tip that she's going to follow, but of course doesn't clue Clark in, because they're rival reporters. So she sends him to cover a trial that they were supposed to cover together on his own.
Yeah. Just taking it from the top of the scene, in addition to the montage, one of the things that I really love is the stock footage of Manhattan at that time. I am a sucker for that in any time, whether I see that in movies, television, whatever, is that kind of stock footage that was taken. And it firmly establishes that Metropolis is a stand-in for New York. And it also firmly establishes that Metropolis is on the East Coast. Now, anybody who's been a Superman fan as long as I am, I hold these things to be self-evident. But the thing is that the show itself later kind of sort of played fast and loose with that, and sort of suggested that it was in California, that it was a stand-in for Los Angeles. And of course, as we know, a lot of the stock footage that they use from the jump, I mean, the Daily Planet building is the city hall in Los Angeles. And so, I mean, they're definitely playing around, but when they're establishing the establishing shot of Metropolis, I appreciate the fact that it was over Manhattan. So I was like, go team. But yeah, you get the organ grinder, you get the monkey in a Superman costume, and it's a great Superman costume. The logo is just like George Reeves, both on the front and the back. They didn't scrimp. Whoever the costume designer was, took the time to make an exact duplicate and smaller for the monkey, which is great. But it's also the really terrible acting kids who are in the scene that also crack me up. There's this one girl, and she's got kind of a bob cut, and she's just jumping around like she's had too much sugar cereal. She is on it. She's just up and down and clapping, and the others are, they're acting like kids, but she's all in. So I appreciated how much she loved the monkey, because I got to tell you that if I were in her shoes, I would have acted exactly the same way. If I saw a monkey like that with a Superman costume, playing with symbols, what am I going to? I'm going to melt into pudding.
Yeah,
you can't want more out of life than that.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, and look, especially 70 years ago, there's less entertainment to be had. So,
right. So a monkey in a Superman suit, man, you might as well be going to the Super Bowl is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's pretty much on par with the halftime shows at the time. But no, seriously, I do love the monkey, and I love the kids. And you're right. The whole warmth between, Clark and Lois, as they just kind of like happen upon the scene, and then their banter as she, tells, well, no, I'm going to go meet my millionaire, my oil millionaire. What was it, by the name of Harry or whatever it was going to be, or Harvey?
Yeah,
Harvey, that she had to go find, and she leaves him in the dirt.
Yeah, it's what's funny. Well, I was thinking about this with respect to the monkey. Again, these episodes didn't air in the order in which they were produced, and either way, it's not like this show was really built to necessarily explore how the world is receiving Superman, right? We'll get that in more modern stories, but it is just kind of interesting because, Haunted Lighthouse aired second, right? And that doesn't quite line up because he lands on the Coast Guard ship and they instantly know it's Superman, but again, it's only the second episode that's aired. And there's clearly, a relationship that's been developed between Superman and Jimmy that we hadn't seen, all that stuff. And then in the case of the talkative dummy, when Superman intercepts the bad guys at the end, one of them is like, "Who are you?"
Right.
So it's the word hasn't reached everyone yet, but now here we are, and there's a monkey in this costume. It's just interesting to see these little glimpses of how Superman is sort of permeating the world. These little flashes that we get of it. I thought that was cool. Well,
the show overall had only a very loose continuity.
Yeah.
It really didn't adhere. There were certain characters that were recurring characters, and there were some. There was one of the things was the reference at one point when kryptonite is finally introduced onto the show, and then later when the kryptonite plays a factor in an episode, they actually have to address the fact of how they'd gotten rid of the kryptonite in the last episode, or the last episode that it appeared, as opposed to just assuming that it was another piece of kryptonite. And I actually appreciated that, because it's true that in mid-century America, other than table salt, the second most common element found in the United States was kryptonite, because everybody had it in the 50s, in comic books, and in the 60s. Kryptonite was everywhere. And easy to synthesize, amazingly easy to turn it into liquid, to turn it into a ray gun, to build people out of it. It's a remarkable thing. Is kryptonite, and just how easy it is to find.
Very, very true. And, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I know one of the color season episodes actually does reference the asteroid that Superman destroys in Panic in the Sky. And it's those references between episodes were few and far between, but every now and then you would get something like that. And that's one of the things I look forward to as I go about my rewatch and watching the episodes that I haven't seen yet, to kind of keep track of those when they pop up. Yeah. Also, I'll just say real quick with the location of Metropolis, and anyone who's been listening to me for any period of time knows that my heart is always with the Smallville television show. I will say it was a little tough to get on board with the idea of Metropolis, Kansas.
Yeah, I never bought that. It just never worked for me. I was like, and with his, I mean, I know they had to do that, so they had to find a way to get every single one of the side characters also to Metropolis. That they had to find a way. But yes, and since, and I can say this about Kansas because my wife is from there. I've been there many, many times. I love Kansas City, which of course is well, there's two Kansas cities, but they're contiguous, but across the two states, Kansas and Missouri. And I enjoy that part of the country, especially the steak. And but I never bought the idea of Metropolis, Kansas. I know I can't buy this. Some people say it's supposed to be a stand-in for like Chicago. I'm like, no. Metropolis is New York. Gotham City is New York. Deal with
it. Fair enough. Yeah. Like I said, for as much as I love the show, that was always a little tough. And then, you talk about shifting locations. At the beginning of Smallville, It was like hours away, right? It was, it wasn't like they were just hopping over. And then by the end of the series, it was
practically a suburb. It was
just a suburb.
Metropolis, yeah.
So anyway, so as Lois is getting in her car and driving away, the organ grinder runs after her. Like he realizes that she took this message that his monkey was supposed to deliver. Now, in an upcoming scene, we'll actually see the procedure where he hands the paper to the monkey, and the monkey climbs up the drain pipe.
Yeah.
Right. And goes into Harold Crane. That's the operative, into his office. I'm fascinated. We don't get this story in the episode, but I'm fascinated by the backstory here. Like, how did this organ grinder get mixed up in this espionage game? And what's fascinating to me is, why would he be part of this? But look, it could be a money thing. It could be anything. Right. But I'm more baffled. Why? Why would they utilize this person grinder in particular? Yeah.
That part. There's a few aspects of the whole organ grinder espionage monkey triangle there that doesn't always line up properly. Throughout the movie or episode.
They're like short.
I keep saying movies, right? Yeah, I keep saying
like short movies.
They are filmed like movies, yes, and that's why I keep thinking of them in those terms. But yeah, this episode, when there are, and I don't even want to belabor it, but there are a few times when it's like that doesn't really make sense. There's some plot hole aspects, not only just the fact that the organ grinder. And clearly, the organ grinder is not like a true believer who's all in. I at least inferred that he somehow had been forced to do this, or was somehow maybe indebted. I don't know. Like you said, they don't explain it, but you don't get the sense that he's a bad guy. You just get a sense that he's this poor guy who's kind of stuck in the middle somehow. And then again, the monkey aspect starts to turn when you realize that the monkey is also being used by the communists, the evil Soviets as well, because he's pressed into service to deliver that message.
Yeah, it's the great untold story of this episode. Because like that's the thing, it's not like this is all a facade. That would have been a great twist if he's on the street and he's got the Italian accent and he's kindly and everything. And then all of a sudden, like he goes into that alley and like he straightens up and his voice changes. And it's like, that would have been great.
Because nobody would ever expect an organ grinder to be an espionage mastermind.
Exactly.
So I'm totally down for that.
between the scenes. That's
yes, exactly.
This a side note. I mentioned this on the show, and I know I'm a huge Honeymooners fan. And one of the things that I always thought would be an interesting thing to do, like in a podcast or otherwise, is like, what happens after some of these episodes? Because like some of the Honeymooners episodes, I don't know if you're a fan,
I'm a fan, but I'm not. I can't say I'm knowledgeable enough to. But yeah,
but
I've liked what I've watched, but I don't. There are Honeymooners super fans out there, just like there's super fans for anything, and I'm not even close to being within sniffing distance of something like that league.
Fair enough. But it's just like most of the episodes end and we're more or less at the status quo. But then there are other episodes where it's like it's ended and Ralph has quit his job or whatever the case may be, or they've lost all their minds. It's like, well, what would happen next? Like it feels like we're leaving them in a real tough spot. Anyway, it's always fun to speculate about that stuff. But from that, the scene with the organ grinder chasing after Lois on the street, we go to the Daily Planet, Lois's office. Jimmy comes in. Lois is preparing to leave. We find out she's going to fly to Baltimore. And I'm going to lay this out because this will play into the scene with Perry that's coming up and the travel plans and everything. I love that bit. So she's going to fly to Baltimore and then get on the Washington Limited train, right, to try to catch up with Maria Maleska. So quick scene between Lois and Jimmy I liked, where she's like, you better call me a cab. And he's like, it's already downstairs waiting. It's like, especially in the beginning, Jim was definitely more capable. And and not just the joke that he would become as the seasons wore on. So I thought that was just a nice little scene between the two of them.
He even has a look of pride on his face.
Yes.
When she see, when he's like, it's already waiting for you. Like he was pleased that he had anticipated her needs. And it's, again, they're not entirely, they never really fully define exactly what Jimmy's role is, basically, because sometimes he's a photographer and sometimes he's sort of like a helper. Sometimes he's a reporter. They just kind of use him as needed. But I like how here he's sort of her Alfred, making sure that she's got everything that she needs to go off on her adventure. And he's very pleased with that. And then again, where he's pressing her, like, where did you get the tip? Where did you get the tip? And she tells him the truth. I got it from a monkey. Yeah. Which of course is to him is like, what? What are you talking about?
And from there, we go to the scene that we were just talking about, where we see the organ grinder give a piece of paper to the monkey. We see him climb up, go into Harold Crane's office, deliver it to him, and basically says, like, I lost the original message, but this is the train that you need to follow.
By the way, the character's his name is Harold Crane, but it's not, because really he was an undercover operative. He's Howard Stark. If you come on, man, tell me he wasn't like a dead ringer for Howard Stark.
Yeah, I can't argue that one.
No, I mean, it's just like, well, here we go. This is the Marvel. This is the Marvel, the MCU DCAU crossover that you never knew happened, where Superman actually met an undercover Howard Stark. So there, I'm sticking with that.
It is pretty uncanny. I'm on board with that.
Howard Stark with a cigarette holder.
Yeah.
Like, what an affectation to have a cigarette holder. It's like, how weird is that? I mean, and then it got me thinking, how often did people actually have cigarette holders in 1951? I mean, it always struck me as just like, the wealthy, or femme fatales used it, but not like just some dude in an office with I know they were trying to make him slick and everything, but it just seems strange to me. But nevertheless, I digress. What I don't like about this, and this is the way we know immediately that this guy's a bad guy, is because he's about to harm Peppy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's like, he's ready to kill that thing the minute he sees it. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, that even for the bad guy of the piece, man, that felt like an overreaction. It's like, what the hell? It's not the monkey's fault. Yeah, I know. That was like, whoa, like, slow your roll. And I mean, thankfully he does, but it's just like, why'd that be your gut reaction here?
I know, really. It's like, hey, there's a monkey in my window just in a Superman suit. I guess I have to kill it. That doesn't, he obviously knows who the monkey is. He knows the monkey's of use to him. So why would he want to kill him, for one thing? And then even if he never saw that monkey before, if a monkey dressed as Superman, dressed like Superman, comes climbing into your office window, my first reaction is not to kill it. My first reaction is, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. No, I know. And, it's like, as the scene unfolds, he'll ultimately calm down, and then he'll direct his underling Max to kill the organ grinder. Because again, clearly the organ grinder read the message, and
Max, the stereotypical Superman, Adventures of Superman, dumb thug. There is always the smart thug and always the dumb thug. So, yeah.
Yes. But look, going back to what we were saying about the untold stories of this episode, you have to wonder, within this international espionage ring, like, maybe it came up in one of the meetings that Harold Crane was like, listen, I came up with this message delivery system. We're going to use this organ grinder and monkey. Everyone's like, no, it's a terrible idea. Like, you can't. And like, maybe he really went out on a limb with this. And now he sees that it's falling apart, and he's like, damn it. Like, they were right. So he's like, I just have to cut all ties.
I mean, it's like the scene in 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 Thunderball, which was of course parodied in Austin Powers, where Spectre is meeting, and they've got all of them lined up at the gigantic conference table, and Blofeld gets pissed off at one of them, and so he presses the button and electrocutes him in his seat. You imagine him sitting there, you're going, number one, yes, our plan is proceeding with the monkey.
Uh-huh. Listen, as good as this episode was, I think there's an even better episode that we didn't get to see, because there's some really fun stuff that you could do here.
It's so true. I love it. And of course, we're never, ever, ever given any kind of explanation as to why he's wearing a Superman outfit to begin with. It has nothing to do with the plot. There's no explanation other than again, you infer that because Superman is popular in Metropolis, an organ grinder would say to himself, hey, idea. I'm putting Peppy in a Superman suit. I'm gonna rack up the tips. And I think he's probably right about that.
Yes. Yeah. That I think tracks. I think it certainly enhanced his act.
Yes, definitely.
But yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
So
but then Peppy gets the banana.
Yeah, he's the banana.
He gets the banana. And I'm telling you, man, I could watch that on an endless loop for 3 hours.
Right.
Just watching him and I like how this bastard who's willing to kill him just happens to have a pre-opened banana in his drawer. So he definitely was expecting him to come by at some point. So something, again, a little bit of a plot hole, but then he hands the banana to him, and just watching him eat that banana.
Random aside, but in my prior job, I was in admissions at the law school where I work, and so routinely have meetings with prospective students and their parents, and a banana was one of my go-to snacks of choice. So many a time I would have a banana on my desk. But one time, a father came in and had a severe allergic reaction to just the smell of it.
Just
it was
it's being there.
Just it's being there. Yeah, it was crazy. I felt so bad. I mean, he was okay, but it was potentially very dangerous to just have that. Out of all of the things, it's not like I had nuts or something like that. It was just this banana. Yeah. So
that's a banana story.
Yeah, but in this case, it ended up it was at least an olive branch of sorts to Peppy after almost killing him.
Yeah.
After this, we make our way to the offices of one Perry White, who is irate at these travel plans that Lois made on a tip from a monkey, right? So we got classic Perry, great Caesar's ghost, no more unapproved travel expenses. My favorite part of this scene is when he sticks his finger at Clark and he goes, and that goes for you too. And I love the way Reeves plays it. Because he's just he just looks down at it and what's going through his head.
Yeah, exactly. And also the way that he spins on Jimmy. He says, and paste that in your hat too, which I've got to find a way to use that. Paste that in your hat too, because that is a great admonishment that speaks 1950s. Paste that in your hat. I love that. That's fantastic. But it's also, I have to say, as someone who has been in the world of journalism for more than 3 decades, is that Perry's meltdown was the most true to life aspect of newsroom life than anything else I've ever seen on this show. The editor going off about unapproved travel expenses is a very real thing. And now I'm on the other side of that, and I am off at the guy who has, what do you mean they didn't get approval before they went? I mean, I'm sitting there watching, I'm like, oh my God, I've lived this scene. It is very true. And I thought to myself, you know what? Perry's right. Perry's absolutely right. She should not be running off like that. It is a major faux pas for a reporter to just up and go someplace without talking to the editor first. So good on you, Perry. Got to have standards.
And then Clark does the exact same thing. Yeah, but then Clark does the exact same thing. He's just like, oh, I got to go too.
Yeah, I know. It just starts running off. Of course, we know Superman's not going to cost a damn thing,
Yes.
which makes, that's another aspect because when he put in for his expenses, how did he concoct? Because now think about this now, because now I'm off to the races. How did he ever put in for the expenses for all the airfare that he never used? What did he do with the money? I'm going to say he gave it to charity because it's Superman.
Yes, I suppose that's true, but that is a good question. And so I've not been in the position of approving, but going back to that job in admissions, I did a lot of travel for recruiting purposes. Right. And so I've been on the side of having to submit expenses and have receipts for everything. So so that part did ring true. Even if I haven't been on the side of being frustrated at an employee's abuses of the system, but like I definitely could identify with that. And, of course, over the course of the scene, they figure out what Lois is doing and what this is all about. But fun scene with there's some really good Perry stuff in this episode.
He is actually my favorite, John Hamilton. It's just come down to the fact that he is my favorite Perry White.
Okay.
I love him. I think he was great. He just the 0 to 60 rage boiling just below the surface, the moral certainty of everything that he does. It's just he can, unlike J. Jonah Jameson, he can back up his swagger with performance. J. Jonah Jameson was a buffoon, but Perry White is not a buffoon. And sometimes he's a real jerk. Sometimes he's not a nice guy, and that's not cool. He's especially abusive to Jimmy, who doesn't deserve it. But the performance and the overall package of this version of Perry White just cracks me up. And maybe it's because the older I get, the more I identify with him. He's like old man yells at clouds.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot that I do like about this version, and I think it certainly works in the context of the show. I don't dislike the John Hamilton Perry. My heart ultimately is with Lane Smith from Lois and Clark, and that was a far warmer, gentler, paternal version of the character.
Right.
But still, had that gruffness. I thought that was a good blend. Where I get annoyed with this Perry on Adventures of Superman, and later in this episode is a good example of it, where Clark has this hunch to track down the monkey.
Right.
And Perry is he's adamant. He's like, he does allow Clark to actually follow this thread. So I do appreciate that. But he's so adamant, like, no, nothing will come of this. And it's just.
But that is actually a very true to life, the creative tension between editors and reporters. The reporters sometimes want to go down rabbit holes, and editors are like, I just said that this one just ran off to Baltimore on her own. What's with the monkey? What can a monkey tell us? It can't even talk. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And I got my reporter number 1 flies out of town without telling me. And I got reporter number 2 is obsessed with a monkey. Think about that for a second. And you're going to start to sympathize with Perry. He's basically running a nut house because a newsroom is an asylum. So he's got Jimmy, who is constantly a thorn in his side. He's got Clark, who's constantly disappearing on the job. And he's got Lois, who just does whatever she wants. I don't blame Perry at all. Perry's misunderstood.
You know what? I'm going to keep that in mind honestly, because it's true. I mean, I think, a healthy dose of skepticism, right? Yeah. It certainly makes sense. I guess I always just think of it in terms of like, and I know we're still early in the series, but with these characters generally, like everything that they've been through, I would want more benefit of the doubt from Perry, towards these in particular. But I totally get what you're saying, and I will keep that in mind. And one of the things I can't wait, this is deep into the season, I think it's the Crime Wave episode, the episode with all of the scenes from previous episodes.
Yeah, Crime Wave.
But we find out via narration in that episode that Perry used to be the mayor.
The mayor of Metropolis, which is one of the weirdest things that was tacked onto the show. And I think they maybe went back to it once again, but it was like, what does that add? It adds nothing. And it just was such a strange thing for them to have as part of this. But I remember that. I thought I remember even when I heard that, I played it back. I said, did I hear that right? He's the former mayor? Since when? And anyway, but back to Perry here. And you're right. What made that such a true to life scene is that Perry knows this in his heart of hearts. He knows this is not going to work. He does it. The odds are low. And as an editor, like in a lot of positions of authority, your job is, and I know we're overthinking this, but bear with me here, is that your entire approach is risk versus reward. How much time and effort do you have to put into something, and is it going to pay off? Now think about it. Clark with the monkey. Let's go back to the monkey now. Let's not forget why we're here. The monkey aspect of it. If I were Perry, I'd also be like, what are you, out of your mind? How is the monkey a lead? The monkey's probably dead in an alley somewhere, or jumped into the water after its master, or whatever, but it's a monkey. What possible use? But he still signs off on it because he does trust Clark. He's like, all right, I don't think this is going to do anything, but have at it. So Clark is all excited, goes off about the monkey. And then this is the part that just blows me away, is that they get to broadcast this all over Metropolis. Clark Kent and the police want the monkey.
Yeah. So
let Clark Kent or the police know if you see the monkey.
Yes. Well, you know what? And in fairness here, we've seen the procedure of the monkey delivering the message. Clark, I don't think knows enough at that. I mean, that is a long shot at that point based on what he knows.
Exactly. That was the part that I was saying, is that's where the show, the first half of the episode, it really does, everything tracks. It's weird to get the monkey involved, but at this point, once Clark becomes obsessed with the monkey, I thought to myself, that doesn't really hold together, because why would he have any idea that the monkey would have anything to do with this? So that's to me where the thread of the episode breaks, but it doesn't matter. I'm willing to just shrug it off, roll with it, because let's not forget that this is about spies and monkeys and Superman costumes.
Yes. Well, so returning to our spy games here. So Clark, races out of Perry's office. We get the stock footage of Clark in his hat, which he didn't have in the prior scene, of course, running into the storage closet. Yes. And then we cut to Lois on the train. She finds Maria Maleska's train car. Maria is unconscious, bloodied head.
She's got bloody head. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't see the hit, but it's
graphic for.
Yeah. And then we see Lois get hit, or, I mean, I think most of the hit,
she gets grabbed,
yeah.
But it's like off. Yeah. She's about to get whacked in the head.
Yes. And then we have Superman fly in. I was very impressed and pleasantly surprised that they actually took the time to show him landing on the train.
On the top of the train. I agree. I had the same thought.
That was a nice touch.
They didn't have to do that.
No.
They didn't have to do that at all, but I'm glad they filmed it. It's an attention to detail. Because remember, really, these shows are about Clark Kent and Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen and Perry. And Superman is we all know he's coming, but he's still kind of the deus ex machina of any story that he ends up in. He comes in, we get to see him maybe twice, once in the beginning, once at the end. And so getting to see him here and him walking on the train and landing, I was like, this is great. I'm glad they took the time to do this, because it just helps to deepen the show. It helps to push Superman as someone of great ability, reminds you that he's a superhero, does all of that. And it just adds that extra texture that reminds you that you're watching a Superman show, and it's not just any old show.
Well said. And like I said before, not remembering all of the beats of each episode, that was one of those things. I was not expecting that scene. As you see the stock footage of him starting to descend, I'm like, okay, and then he'll be inside the train. And then when I saw him land, I was like, right on. Like they really, that was cool. So he goes inside, he finds Lois and Maria. He calls for the porter to get a doctor. And then we get really what for me was my favorite scene of this episode, because he's talking to the doctor about Maria's injuries and everything. And he says, and I mean, you feel the anger here. He's like, I'd like to find the man that did this.
Yeah.
And
that's Golden Age Superman.
That's right Golden Age Superman. That's what I like that. But what really makes this scene sing to me is that moments later, as Maria starts to wake up, he just does a complete turn, right? And he kneels beside her and he says, I'm Superman. I'm your friend.
Yeah.
And he's just so calm and tender and warm and friendly. Yeah. And it's just like that turn and again, just seeing the different facets of the character in that one scene. I loved it.
It's even foreshadowed just before he calls the porter, when he's looking at Lois, he's helping Lois, and he sees Maria, and he actually stops and he pets her head, just as this very gentle. And remember, again, like we just saw him fly in and land on a moving train, and now he's just being gentle and kind. And he calls for the porter, get me the doctor. The doctor comes back, and like you say, he's at turns angry about someone who would do this to them, and also deeply concerned. Can I take her to a hospital? What can I, And it's the doctor who asks, "Can I question it?" He's also deferential to the doctor. He doesn't try to push it. He's like, "Can I talk to her?" "Yes, you can talk to her, but not for him." Okay, he does, and then the doctor's like, "You better stop now." I was like, "Okay." He's not like that scene. We've seen versions of that scene in so many different iterations over the years in different contexts, but here is just the fact that you're right. He's so gentle, but yet I also love the button that they put on the scene where he's like, "Okay, you take care of them," or he says, "I'll take care of them." The doctor does. "You go get that locket." And even the way the doctor says it, there's like his voice firms up, and it's like, "I'm with you, Superman." And the Superman goes off to be the adventurer, and it's just great. It's subtle, but it's such a winning scene. You're right. Plus, it's got old-fashioned trains, and you get an old-fashioned compartment train. I'm just immediately going to be tickled by that anyway.
That's the thing. I know when we get to the color years, it's far more the warm paternal Superman. Yeah. What I like here is that you get that, but you do also get that golden age edge and toughness.
Yeah, the ass kicker.
Yeah, and this will again be a theme throughout this podcast, but I feel like this scene just shows that essence, that ineffable quality that Reeves had, where again this had nothing to do with effects or costume or anything. Right. It was just the way he spoke and carried himself that it just made you feel that. Like it made you feel like he was going to go kick some ass. And it also made you feel like she was in good hands. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Perfect.
I love it. Then we get a humorous scene after this where as Clark, he's on the phone to Perry. And he's just like, "I'm going to look around some more." He's like, "You are?" He's like, "Oh, I need Superman."
Like, I need Superman. I'm like, "Oh, come on."
But my favorite part of this exchange when he's on the phone with Perry is he starts to give Perry orders. He's like, "Have Henderson find the organ grinder, and we should probably have some of our staff do that." And Perry like bristles at this. He's like, "You don't give me directions." I love it though.
But it's so true to life. Again, I can tell you that happens all the time. I need this, and it's whoa. Who's making the decisions here? I mean, that is classic. But it's really. I mean, I'm sure that's true in any kind of job environment. But having knowledge of that world, it is funny to see those little scenes that are actually true to life, whether they meant them to be or not. But the part that grabs me is that he says to him, "I'm going to look around more," and then the word comes in because Jimmy walks in and very excitedly, and he's showing the paper that says that the organ grind came over a teletype of some sort, and that the organ grinder was dead, and he was and he's insistent that despite Perry's, demeanor, that he look at this because he knows how important this is. Perry does look at it, reads it, and then he says, "Well, Clark, you better get right over to the morgue." And it's like, well, wait a minute. Isn't he on the train down in Baltimore and Philadelphia or wherever they were at this time? It's like, get right over to the morgue. I mean, the Daily Planet's, a great metropolitan newspaper. They had more than 3 reporters.
Did they?
Yeah, they did, because there is an episode I remember seeing that they have on occasion shown the city where they show other people walking around. So we know that others at least exist. Whether they do anything, I have no idea.
We did hit on that in one of the prior episodes, and I remarked about that. I think it was the case of the talkative dummy where you see Jimmy in the city room, and I was just like, "Oh my God, there are other people who work here?"
Work at the Daily Planet, yeah.
Two quick follow-ups. One, I think one of the reasons why I love all of these Clark moments where, he's giving Perry directions, or when he's, not taking the finger in his face all too seriously, is that, look, we love the Christopher Reeve iteration of the bumbling, mild-mannered Clark, but it's like, this is not that. And I like it. Like, it's so cool to see this kind of confident, capable Clark.
Right. And that's what in the comics, that's where I know that John Byrne had jumped off of, is that his feeling was, you can find a way to explain away that Superman does not need to be bumbling, because really, who is going to make the connection if you think about it? Why would anybody think? And there's a later episode here in the first season, the stolen costume, which, by the way, if you're looking for people, I put in my hat, I put my super hat back in the ring for that episode. It's such a great one. But the point being is that, you have, damn it, I lost my train of thought. As soon as I started thinking about
the John Byrne and nobody making the connection.
Okay, yeah. Let me get back. Okay. Right. So anyway, you go back to Byrne, and he wrote about the fact, or spoke about the fact, that he wanted his Clark Kent to be more like George Reeves, that confident, take charge, doesn't always always walks up to the line, but knows when to back off when he thinks if he's overdoing it, and it would then somehow make him think anybody would think that he was Superman. But his Clark Kent is not a milksop. His Clark Kent is very capable and sometimes really aggressive, as we see in an upcoming scene.
Yes, very much so. And then the other thing I was just going to say, going back to the expense reports and everything, that's one thing, and I've said this before, but I'm always so struck in watching this show in particular, and maybe even when we get to Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, but they dealt with some budget issues, within the context of the show. But here it's like so many instances where the paper is sending 2 to 3 reporters. They're flying them. They're putting them up in multiple hotel rooms. I'm always thinking it's such a far cry from, what you would see today, I think, in most instances. So just kind of funny to think of that.
Yep.
So after this, we get a quick scene back in Harold Crane's office where Max comes in and tells him Joe, I guess the guy on the train, got the locket. So just a quick scene between them there. Then we go back to the planet, Perry's office, a scene that, we've already discussed for the most part, where Clark confirms this was our organ grinder, right? And he has the hunch to find the monkey. And again, Perry is not on board with this, but does allow Clark to put the message out there. Was there anything else about that scene that we hadn't hit on yet?
No, I think we pretty much, yeah.
All right, cool. Back to Harold Crane and Max. They have the locket now. They take the microfilm out of it. They hear the news blast about the monkey. And then we get, these two, Max explains how the monkey got away when he was offing the organ grinder. And as Max says, he couldn't go chasing after a monkey.
By the way, I'm sorry to talk over you.
No.
Let's point out also that in the teletype, it actually says that he was stabbed in the heart. That's how they gave a cause of death. And it's brutal. He stabbed him in the heart. Damn.
I know.
That's cold.
Given the way the rest of this episode went, the way it started with a whipping scene, I'm shocked that we actually didn't see the stabbing.
Yeah, right. Seriously.
They figured, all right, we'll give the kids a break. It's one per episode. But yeah, even if it's off screen, it's multiple deaths and acts of violence in this episode.
Yeah. Yep.
But anyway, so they're, now Max is off to try to get the monkey. And then we get back to Perry's office and the scene that clearly is a highlight for both of us, where, first there's another funny bit where Perry's on the phone and after he gets done, he says to Clark, he's like, those fellows must think Superman works for the Daily Planet. Like it was the government calling, to get in touch with Superman. But Clark's reaction was great. He was just like,
yeah,
what?
He's like, what?
The performance choice, it was just so oh man, just these little touches just add so much color to it. It was fantastic. But then Jim calls, because Clark was looking for Jimmy. He wanted him to basically man the hotline, right, for tips about the monkey. But as they're having this discussion, Jim calls looking for Clark to tell him that he has a lead on the monkey. And Clark's frustration and patience just mounts.
And builds. He starts shouting at him. And it's funny to watch. It's really funny to watch him just loot. Like he's so impatient. He's like, Jimmy.
I know. Because Jim is really setting the table here. He's explaining himself. He's actually giving him salient information, but Clark is like, cut to the chase. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like in Jim's defense, he's explaining how he got this tip. The fact that it's in the suit, the monkey's in the Superman costume, like he's, trying to relay the information, if I identify the correct, but Clark is just like, monkey, where's the monkey?
Where are you? Where?
Now, in fairness to Clark,
and Clark doesn't for 1 second say to himself or anybody, and nobody references the fact that it was Clark who put the target on the monkey's back by having this be a public announcement to begin with. Because now you're telling the guys who might be after the monkey that the good guys are after the monkey because they think something's up with the monkey. So all it does is tell the bad guys, we better get that monkey.
Yeah.
They weren't thinking about the monkey until the broadcast. Because rationally, why would you?
Well, Harold Crane seemed to think that that Max killed the monkey too. Or,
No witnesses.
I know. What's funny too is that, Max is surprisingly honest, right? Because Max could have been like, nah, I killed the monkey.
Yeah, I kind of threw him in the river. I kind of I twisted his neck. I did something horrible.
And that could have been the end of it. But instead, he's got to go hit the streets of Metropolis again to try to find
he got away.
Now, in fairness to Clark, though, how many monkeys are roaming the streets of Metropolis,
like
especially in a Superman costume? So he's probably like, I don't need all this backstory, but there's maybe it's the Night of Terror episode. I'll remember when we get there, but or I'll be reminded. But Clark has a similar moment of impatience with Ms. Bacharach, and I think it's that episode where there's that message that has flew off the desk, and he's just so impatient, and it's comical. It's really funny. Yeah. So anyway, after this phone call, Jimmy tries to get the monkey. He sees Max carrying the monkey on the street. They get into it. Max knocks him out and throws him over his shoulder, carries him away.
Max is strong. Geez. Jimmy's not a big guy, but he's a full-grown man. He probably was at least 135 pounds, 150 pounds maybe. Throw him over his shoulder like that and walk away. It was like, damn, that was not an easy, and he did it in one take. Now you saw his knees buckle slightly. I know you're the guy who lifts weights and stuff, but I watched it but he did it and he walked right around the corner. He probably just then passed out as soon as he was at a camera shot. But nevertheless, it's like, damn, that's impressive.
That's impressive. Look, I've never carried a full-grown man over my shoulders like that. So and I like the fireman's carry. No, I was struck by that. I was like, right on,
Yeah.
Again, another instance where it would have been really easy to just show him knocking him out and then starting to drag him and then you cut away or something like that. But they actually,
they go all in.
Yeah.
Although I don't like how Pepe got a little rough manhandled a little bit during the scuffle.
Yeah.
And it also happened to be the same 4 or 5 kids that we saw at the beginning of the episode too, because I recognized the really excitable girl because once she starts running toward the camera, she breaks into a big grin. She basically breaks character. She's running off. So I don't know who little monkey girl was. I don't know where she is today, but thank you, little monkey girl, for adding a little bit of element of humor unintentionally to this wonderful broadcast.
Yeah, she really made an impression. That's for sure.
She definitely did. Yes.
So Clark and Perry show up. Clark was able to get a hold of the monkey and, puts his hunch, to effect here, right? And hands the piece of paper to the monkey and then watches the monkey climb up. You have to imagine perhaps he could have used, his enhanced senses to track them, but it's fine. It close that loop of why he was so interested in finding the monkey.
Right. Proving that he was right, even though, again, a lot of leaps of logic. But that's all I'll say about that now.
I know, but it is, I wasn't thinking about that so much heading into this, but it is true. That is a big, it's a big leap to think that the monkey played the role that it did. The organ grinder is one thing. He had this message.
Right, sure.
That's the thing. I think the natural inference after, Clark had enough details is that, these messages are in that fortune box, right?
Yeah, right. That's probably.
And they're coming by and taking it that way. The idea that the monkey would play such a critical part in this process, that was a leap. But, hey, we go along.
It paid off, though. Sometimes a hunch just pays off.
Yeah. So Clark changes to Superman and busts in right as, once again, the monkey is about to get it.
Yeah. The Max fires on the monkey. That's why would you do that? Why would you? Why do that to the monkey? That's just not. And Superman, and it was one of the best played and executed special effects moments on the show, because when he does swing in and land, and the gun goes off and it bounces off his chest, that actually is underrated, particularly for 1951. That's really good stunt work, really good effects work. And this show never gets enough credit for that sort of thing, because people always think about the flying and how, flying is obviously it's all rigged up and whatever. But the other elements like that was a great scene. Really well, really well executed.
Oh, I agree totally. Very effective. Great to see him knocking those two guys together, taking them out, rescuing Jim. And then our little button at the end of the scene after Superman assures Jimmy that Lois and Maria are okay, which I feel like was more of a reminder to the audience. So it's just
right, exactly. So to tie up that plot thread.
And then we end on the monkey once again eating a banana.
Because really that really should have been the whole episode. 25 minutes of the monkey eating a banana would have been enough for me. Everything else is gravy, but just that monkey and that banana. And I have to say that when Superman was fighting both of them, I thought to myself, oh, are we going to get a head clock out of this? And sure enough, we do. I'm like, boom, the two coconuts go together. That's Superman. That's Golden Age Superman. And then we get the happy monkey at the end with his banana, and no longer under threat.
Yeah. And you wonder what will become of the monkey.
I assume that he goes to the Fortress of Solitude and he renames him Beppo.
There you go.
Beppo the super monkey. There you go. Because this one is Peppy, so it's not that far.
I know.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I really enjoyed my viewing of this, and I particularly had a lot of fun with this conversation. So thank you very much.
I tell you, man, I didn't expect it to go down this road, but I'm glad it did.
Now the last thing that we do on these episodes is we rate it. I've devised a system based on 1 to 5 fedoras. So how many fedoras would you give this episode?
Or actually, it should be jaunty angled fedora. Yes. Because that's my wife has always put. In fact, when I was watching it again this afternoon, and Clark walked in, and she like walked in the room. She says, "Oh, was his fedora at a jaunty angle?" Because it's always at a jaunty angle. So how many jaunty angled fedoras do I give this episode? I would say it is. If I'm grading it, I always grade it on the curve. Because am I comparing it to the series overall? Am I comparing it to a first season episode? Am I comparing it to the black and white years? So I think for sheer entertainment value, it is definitely in the 4 range, with elements of 5 thrown in there. On the whole, because of some of the inherent silliness and some of the, kind of the downside of those parts that we're laughing about, I would go a little bit lower. So let's round it at 4 and say, I mean, it's a black and white episode. So it almost means it's almost definitely going to be superior than a color episode. Although I love the color episodes too. It's just such a different tone. So that's my extremely long-winded way of getting to 4.
Okay. Right on. No, I appreciate all of that. I'm going to go 3, and
I can see that too.
Yeah. And for anyone who's been listening to these episodes and like, wow, he's like kind of hard on the grading. I consider 3 to be a good score. I really enjoyed this episode. The thing that I keep coming back to, and I've said this when I give my ratings, is just like, I have in my head what I know my 5s are and what I know, like a lot of my 4s are.
Yeah.
So it's more in the context of that. But this was definitely this was a very, very entertaining, enjoyable episode. So I give this a very, very solid, respectable 3.
3. Yeah. I can't argue with any of that. It's a perfectly valid position. And I think I'm thinking of it as a 4 more because of the time that I've had such a great time talking about it, that it's elevated it in my mind. Yeah. More than if you had just asked me, say, "Hey, what'd you think?" I was like, "Oh, it's a 3." But now I see all of the unintentional and intentional comedic value of the episode that gives it a little bonus for me.
Right on. The last thing, and I'll let you go and I'll let our audience go, but going back to this idea of Perry as the mayor, and I know we'll when we get to that episode, we'll have more to say, but throughout the series, you really do see the position of prominence that Perry and the planet occupy in the city, and the respect that so many people give his reporters. And I think it's easy to just attribute that to respect for journalists, and especially at that
Yes.
time. So I don't think you need the mayor angle, but I don't know, like kind of having that in the back of my head, it's like that might also help account for why Perry is as respected as, like, he's had this history.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Could be.
So we'll see. But just a very interesting side note to that character.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you so much, man. This was fun.
Thank you for having me. I had a blast.
I hope that everyone will check out 13thdimension.com. A ton of great articles and interviews. I really hope people will visit the site.
Please, I hope, it would be, as I always say, when I go on podcasts, if you like what we're talking about here, then it's a very good chance that you will find something fun to read over at 13th Dimension. At least that's what we endeavor to do. So stop on by.
Yes. And I always appreciate the opportunities you've given me to write for the site. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And thank you for being on this show. And I've mentioned this previously, but just as a reminder for folks, Dan was on a very recent episode of Digging for Kryptonite, my other Superman show that aired just before I launched this podcast. We talked about Superman and the Secret Planet, the unproduced screenplay that would have been a George Reeves Superman movie. So we had a great conversation about Superman and the Secret Planet. If anyone missed that on Digging for Kryptonite, I hope they'll check it out. All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, audience. We will be back here in 2 weeks with Season 1, Episode 6, Adventures Await. Support the show and receive exclusive additional content, including my DC Movie Rewatch podcast at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Thank you to all patrons for enabling me to produce this show. Also, be sure to explore the other shows within the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, which is home to Digging for Kryptonite, another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, Summoning the Zords, and My Comic Shop History, all hosted by yours truly. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts. Visit flatsquirrelproductions.com for more. Thank you all.